Friends, this is a channel about real life. No sugarcoating, no lies, only men's stories full of struggle, betrayal, and loss. It's about those who life knocked down, but who still found the strength to rise and keep going. If you seek honesty, strength, and inspiration, you're in the right place. His life had shrunk to a narrow strip of gray days. He woke up in the morning and no longer felt any sense in getting up because there was no one. Beside him, the woman who had once been closest left him went to another, and he saw how everything they had built over the years crumbled in an instant like dust. The children turned away from him as if he no longer existed for them, as if he were a stranger who had interfered in their lives. He was left with nothing. Everything he had earned, everything he had saved, everything he had protected, vanished like smoke, leaving behind a void and a burden of debts he could not overcome. He was broken, crushed, humiliated. The world seemed to mock him, and every morning the mirror showed him not who he had once been, but only the ruined shell of a man whose life had been trampled. He was 55, and instead of wisdom, strength, and confidence, he had loneliness, pain, and the shadow of past defeats. He wandered the streets of the city like a shadow, feeling neither people, nor noise, nor colors. Everything seemed empty, lifeless, cold. He entered cheap cafes where stale coffee smelled of despair and sat silently looking out the window, but beyond that window he saw not the city, but his own losses, his own failures, his own ruin. Fate? He was indifferent to everything he had stopped fighting. He simply sank lower and lower into this darkness inside himself, and every night he fell asleep thinking that the new day would change nothing, that the new day would only continue his torment. A secret cry resounded in his heart, but the world did not hear it, and even he himself could no longer find the strength to answer that cry. He was empty, like an abandoned house where once there had been warmth, and now only the wind blew through the ruins. When he finally realized that nothing was left and that there was nothing to hold on to, he began to walk away from people, from the noise, from the cities and roads. His steps led him into solitude because only there, in the mountains, in the fields, in the silence, did he feel he could at least for a moment stop this pain. He walked without a map, without a plan, because he had no plans anymore. There was only the desire to find at least a shadow of meaning, at least one spark that would make his heart beat again. He walked for weeks, sleeping under the open sky, listening to the wind howling through the trees and watching the night stars burning above him, as if reminding him that the world was still alive, even when he felt dead. He began to find in nature what he could not find among people: peace, honesty, silence without demands, without betrayals. He sat on rocks, looking into the distance, and felt a quiet voice awaken within him saying, "You are still alive. You can still rise." This voice was tiny, but it was there, and it was more than he had. Before he began to write his thoughts in an old notebook, he found among his things, he wrote without words, without rules, simply pouring out his pain, and each line became a little lighter. He began to read books that he happened upon in abandoned huts in small libraries along the way, and each book was like another person's experience, touching his heart and giving him understanding that he was not alone in this world, that others had also fallen, others had also searched and found. He began to meditate, not knowing what the word meant, simply sitting in silence with his eyes closed and listening to his breathing, and this breathing became for him the first sign that life still continues and that he still had a chance. He felt how, with each day, his pain did not disappear but began to transform into another strength, into a quiet, deep power that is born in darkness. When you have nothing left to lose over time, his solitude ceased to be a burden. It became his teacher, because in the silence he began to hear what he had previously drowned out with the noise of people, televisions, conversations, and fuss. He began to see that true strength is not in having a crowd around you, but in having resilience in your heart. And he began to understand that his past was not a loss. It was a lesson that every betrayal, every blow, Every loss had not destroyed him but had strengthened him, though he did not see it. Then his body grew weaker, but his spirit began to awaken. And every morning he faced not punishment, but as a student waiting for new knowledge, he began to ask himself questions: who am I? Why am I here? And why am I still alive? And with each day, the answer became clearer. He realized that meaning is not in money, not in fame, not in others' recognition. Meaning is in the movement forward, in the very act of breathing in giving the world what you have, even if it is only a small light in the darkness. He began to help random travelers he met on his path, sharing breadwater and words he saw in their eyes the reflection of his own pain, and felt that by helping others, he was healing himself. He began to train his body doing push-ups by the river, running in the forest, lifting stones, and each movement restored in him a sense of strength. He began to feel that body and spirit are one, and if one grows, the other follows, and gradually he transformed his pain into energy, his fatigue into discipline, his solitude into freedom. And this process was painful, but he felt that this was his path, that he was being born again, not as the one he had been, but as the one he had always meant to be. And he was no longer afraid because fear had already been destroyed in those dark nights when he was alone with himself. His inner strength began to demand an outlet, and he felt he could no longer just sit in silence. He had to act because silence had taught him to hear, but now he had to speak. Silence had taught him to wait, but now he had to create. And he began with small things. He crafted simple objects with his hands, molded wooden figures, made benches from boards, repaired old, abandoned houses, and this gave him a feeling that he was returning life to places where it was no longer expected. He exchanged his labor for food and saw how people looked at him first as broken and then as someone bringing value, and this amazed him because he felt that he once again had a place. Among people, he began to write long texts in his notebook, not only about pain, but about what he had understood in the silence. He described how loneliness can become strength, how losses can become a foundation, how darkness can teach you to see the light, and he shared these writings with others and saw how they changed their faces, how sparks of hope lit up in them. He realized that his experience was not a burden. It was a gift that he could turn his pain into words, and words into a power that lifts others. He began to think about creating something bigger than a notebook, something that could unite people who had also lost everything but wanted to rise. He saw before him the picture of a great endeavor born from his personal darkness, and this endeavor was not just a business. It was his new soul, his new body, his new life. He began to take the first steps, writing plans, meeting new people who believed in his idea, and even when there was no money, even when resources were zero, he felt that now he had the greatest capital. One could have his inner strength, and no one could take it from him. His idea began to grow like a small seed breaking through stone. He had no starting capital, no support, no connections, but he had one thing: determination that cannot be bought. He began by creating a small group of people who, like him, had lost everything in life, but wanted to find a new path. He gathered them in an old warehouse that had once been empty and cold, and now became a space where new life was born. They repaired this warehouse with their own hands, painted walls, pulled boards, inserted windows, and every nail driven into this building became a symbol of their revival. He learned to organize work so that even chaos became order. He showed others how discipline and simple daily steps can turn even the deepest failure into a path upward. He began selling simple items made by their hands, benches, tables, shelves, and people looked at these items and saw not just wood and nails, but the story of people who had not broken and bought them not for the form, but for the strength behind them. And the first earned money was not large, but it was symbolic because it was money earned honestly together. Without deceit, without compromise, he felt that this was only the beginning. He began expanding their activities, opening small courses, teaching people, Rejected by the world, simple but important things. How to rebuild from zero. How to live from zero. And every person leaving this space carried not only knowledge but a sense of strength. He passed on through his own path, and over time people began to talk about him. First in small circles, then in larger ones, he became known as the one who creates from nothing. Not just a business, but a new chance for life. And this first success became proof for him that his darkness was not a curse. It was a gift that opened the way to light. His business began to grow like a living organism each day, bringing new challenges, new people, new problems. But he now saw this not as a burden, but as an opportunity to develop. He hired people who had also experienced losses and taught them not to be afraid to take first steps, not to be afraid to make mistakes, not to be afraid to fall and get up again together. They created products that were not only practical, but filled with meaning. Every client using their products felt the power behind them, and the company grew slowly but steadily. He felt that what mattered was not speed, but stability, and that true strength is in discipline, in constant work, and in the ability not to give up even when it seems everything is lost. He began traveling to find new ideas, new markets, new ways to develop his business, and each time he returned with new knowledge and new strength, he created partnerships, helped other entrepreneurs in crisis, and saw how his experience transformed into strength. For others, he realized his path was not only about money, but about creating a community of people who help each other become stronger. And this community grew like a living organism. It became not just a business, but a symbol of revival and strength for those who had lost everything. And his heart filled with gratitude because he finally realized that all the pain, all the betrayals, all the losses were part of this path, and that now he not only survived but helped others survive. And the feeling that you are needed, that you make a difference, was his greatest wealth. His company grew into a huge network of people and activities working together, benefiting millions, and he became known not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person who changes lives. He no longer counted money because he understood that true wealth is in the ability to give, in the ability to inspire, in the ability to make the world better. His life was filled with gratitude and love, but not the kind of love given for money or status. It was love for life, for people, for himself. He remembered his falls, his nights of loneliness, and it seemed impossible that the man who had lain on a cold floor with nothing now stood before people following his idea, and he felt pride not for becoming a billionaire, but for overcoming himself, his fears, his doubts. He became an example that even when everything is destroyed, one can start again and become stronger than ever, and he knew his path was not finished, because true strength is to keep moving, to share experience and inspire others. And every day he woke early and looked at the sky, breathed deeply, and felt truly alive because he had gone through darkness and found a light that no one could take away. And this victory was the most precious because it was internal. It was in his heart and never depended on external circumstances. He stood at the top of what he had created, looking at a world that once seemed hostile and empty, and felt incredible peace. He remembered all the falls, all the betrayals, all the losses, and understood that they were part of his path, part of what made him who he became. He saw young people coming to him for advice, support, and learning, and saw in their eyes the same sparks of hope he had once found in himself. And this gave him strength to create more, to give more, to inspire more. He no longer feared losses because he knew true strength is not in material things, not in fame, not in recognition, but in being true to yourself and standing on your feet even when everything is destroyed, and giving light, even when there is darkness around him. His heart was filled with gratitude to life, to the world, to himself. He realized that true success is not numbers in the bank, not titles and awards, but inner peace, strength, and the ability to do good. And he no longer thought about the past because it became the foundation of his new life. He breathed deeply and felt that now He did not just survive, but truly lived. He was a billionaire, but the greatest capital he acquired was his inner freedom, his victory over fear and darkness, and he knew that this path was not finished because life always moves forward. But now he walked confidently with an open heart, ready to receive and give, ready to inspire and be an example of strength, courage, and inner light for all who are still seeking their path.